The galaxy had never seen a human race in the Deathworld circuit before. Most aliens laughed at the idea. To them, humans were too fragile, too slow, and too emotional for such a brutal event. But one name had changed that opinion. Jax Carter. Jax was Earth's top racing champion. He had broken records in every country and beaten machines that others thought were unbeatable. But none of that could prepare him for what was coming on planet Varnock, home of the deadliest racing track in the known universe. When the invitation came, it wasn't expected. A sleek black drone landed in the middle of Jax's practice course on Earth, delivering a glowing cube. The message was short. Prove yourself where legends fall. Welcome to the Deathworld circuit. Jax didn't even hesitate. He pressed, his palm to the cube. I accept. Varnock was nothing like Earth. The air was heavy, full of strange electric energy. The skies burned orange, and every hour, the planet's gravity shifted slightly, enough to throw weaker pilots off course. But Jax didn't flinch, he just adjusted. He stood out the moment he landed at the circuit base, tall for a human, wearing his Earth-made racing suit with pride. He walked past alien racers who looked at him like a joke. Some were thin and long, with 4 arms. Others had shells as hard as stone. Many of them whispered as he passed. Who, let the Earthchild in? He'll break before the second corner. I give him 5 seconds before he's dust. But Jax smiled quietly. He'd heard worse back home. One alien, though, didn't mock him. She stared instead. Her name was Cathera Vesk, last year's champion. She had silver skin, sharp eyes, and a calm face. She didn't speak. She just watched. The first event was a qualifying race, the Crimson Climb. It took place on a narrow cliffside trail where the gravity twisted upward. Most racers used anti-gravity stabilizers to stay grounded. One mistake, and the vehicle would shoot into the sky and be lost. Jax's team, made up of Earth engineers and volunteers, had built his racer from scratch. They called it the Storm Arrow. It wasn't the fastest machine, but it was tough, and human-built from the inside out. As the countdown began, Jax sat inside the cockpit. His heart beat steady. The alien engines roared around him, glowing with colors he had never seen. Human. A soft voice came from his comm. It was Cathera. This track eats beginners. I hope you brought your fear with you, you'll need it. Jax replied with a grin. Fear gets in the way. I left it at home. Then the race began. The cliffside track was cruel. Gravity waves pulled the racers in strange directions. Jax's vehicle was almost thrown into the sky twice, but he kept control. His instincts kicked in. Not just training, but something deeper. While others depended too much on auto controls, Jax did it old school. He trusted his hands, his gut, and his mind. Halfway through, 3 racers crashed. Another flipped upside down and vanished into the red clouds. Jax kept going. Then suddenly the skies flashed green. A wave of magnetic energy hit the course. All vehicles were pushed sideways. Jax used it. He tilted his wings and shot forward. By the end of the race, only 8 of the 20 racers crossed the finish line. Cathera came in first, Jax came in second, just behind her. The crowd fell silent. A human finished? Second place? How? That's impossible. Cathera walked up to him after the race. She didn't smile. You surprise me. Human. But this was only the first taste. The next race will test more than skill. Jax looked her straight in the eye. Good. I like a challenge. Later that night, in a private room overlooking the burning cliffs of Varnock, Cathera met with her engineer. This human cannot be allowed to win, she said coldly. He is a danger to the circuit and to me. Her engineer, a small lizard-like creature, nodded. We can make his stabilizer fail during the next track. He won't crash hard. Just slow enough to fall out of the race. Cathera looked out the window, thinking. No one must know. We'll call it an unfortunate system overload. She didn't like cheating, but this was about pride and survival. The Deathworld circuit wasn't just sport. It was a symbol of power among the stars. If a human won, everything would change. Meanwhile, Jack sat with his mechanic, a woman named Lena, who had been with him since his earliest races back on Earth. "They're not happy you placed second," she said. "Let them be angry," Jax replied. "I didn't come here to make friends. I came to prove something." Lena nodded. "Then you'll need to be sharper tomorrow. I saw Cathera's team messing with data during the race. We need to scan the Storm Arrow tonight." Jax looked out at the stars above the alien sky. "I don't trust them, but I'll be ready." And so, the real game began. Not just of speed and danger, but of mind and strategy. On Varnock, Jax had stepped into a world where one mistake meant death. But Earth's racing champion wasn't just skilled. He was human. And that made him the wildest card in the galaxy. He didn't need to be the fastest. He just needed to outlast them all. The second race of the Deathworld circuit was known as the Sandstorm Run, and it was feared by every racer who had ever survived it. The track lay across the Merkin Dunes, a desert so harsh that it changed shape every hour. Razor-sharp winds, deep sand pits, and sudden bursts of electrical storms made this race nearly impossible to predict. For most racers, surviving the Sandstorm Run was more important than winning it. But Jax Carter wasn't like most racers. He stood by his vehicle, the Storm Arrow, early that morning inspecting every bolt and system. The desert sun had not yet risen, but he preferred to check everything himself before every race. His engineer, Lena, walked up holding a datapad. "I scanned the diagnostics again," she said. "Everything looks normal, but I don't trust." Jax nodded. "Neither do I." They had seen strange numbers in the stabilizer's balance system, small enough to ignore, but Jax's gut told him something wasn't right. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts. "Double-check the override control," Jax said. "If something goes wrong, I might have to fly this thing manually." Lena looked at him. "Manually? In a sandstorm?" Jax smiled. "Why not?" Elsewhere, Cathera Vesk sat with her engineer in a private chamber. Her expression was calm, but her voice was cold. "The sabotage is ready?" she asked. The lizard-like engineer nodded. "Yes. The Storm Arrow's left stabilizer will stop responding after the 4th checkpoint. It will feel like a system failure. Nothing will trace back to us." "Good," Cathera said softly. "He's talented, but he doesn't belong. Here, the galaxy watches the circuit. If a human wins, it will shatter tradition." She looked out the window at the rising storm clouds in the distance, and Jax Carter must not be the one to change history. The Sandstorm Run began with 20 racers lined up on a long stretch of cracked desert ground. High above, a floating station buzzed with cameras and drones, broadcasting the event live across the galaxy. Jack sat in his cockpit, hands steady on the controls. He looked across the starting line and saw Cathera's vehicle, sleek, silver, and deadly, beside him. She didn't look at him. But Jack saw something strange in her eyes before the countdown began. A flicker. Maybe guilt, or maybe nothing. The announcer's voice echoed across the desert. 3, 2, 1, begin. The ground shook as all the racers launched forward. The first few kilometers were calm compared to what came next. The Storm Arrow handled well. Jax kept it low and fast, using gravity pulses to hop over rising dunes. The sand was soft, but the path was rough. Already 2 racers dropped out, engines buried deep in sand pits. Jax stayed focused. Then, just after passing the 4th checkpoint, it happened. His stabilizer blinked red. The Storm Arrow tilted hard to the left. Jax fought the controls, but it was like steering a sinking ship. Stabilizer offline, the AI warned. Attempting recovery. "No time," Jax muttered. He hit the override switch, bypassing the auto-control system. Suddenly he had full manual control, but with no assistance. Every bump, every gust of wind, every twist in gravity would now hit the Storm Arrow directly. "Jax, what's going on?" Lena's voice came through the radio. "Stabilizer's gone," Jax replied, gripping the controls tightly. "I'm flying blind," Lena gasped. "You need to stop. You'll crash." Jax narrowed his eyes, watching the swirling sands ahead. Not yet. The next part of the race was the most dangerous. A giant storm cloud had moved in from the east, bringing with it powerful winds and lightning bursts. Most racers slowed down, but Jax didn't. He adjusted the storm arrow's flaps. By hand, tilted its body low and used the storm's push to glide across the dunes. Every second was a fight. The sand hit the windshield like tiny knives and static charges filled the air with sparks. Twice, the storm arrow almost flipped. Once it bounced hard enough to lift off the ground. But Jax kept control. From above, the crowd watched in silence. The announcers were stunned. The human? He's still going. Is that manual control? Impossible. No one can do that by hand. And yet Jax did. Cathera was far ahead, racing smoothly through the storm. Her vehicle had no problems. But as she checked her rear camera, she saw something that made her eyes widen. The storm arrow was catching up. How? She whispered. He should be broken. Her guilt returned. She had never meant for Jax to crash. She just wanted him out of the race. But now, seeing him fight through the storm with pure will, it shook her. Suddenly, lightning struck the ground just ahead of her. She veered hard, missing a sharp turn. Sand flew into her engine vents, slowing her down. Jax passed her without a word. The final stretch was brutal. The wind roared like thunder and visibility dropped to near zero. But Jax could feel the path, every movement of the dunes, every echo of the wind. He read it like a book. The finish line appeared through the sand haze. Jax pushed the storm arrow forward. One alien vehicle crossed just before him, placing him in third. But it didn't matter. He had survived sabotage, conquered the sandstorm, and earned the respect of thousands watching across the stars. After the race, Jax climbed out of his cockpit soaked in sweat and sand. Lena ran to him, hugging him tightly. "You're insane," she said. "But you're amazing." Cathera approached slowly. "You should not have made it," she said quietly. Jax looked at her calm. "I know, but I did." She paused, then added, "I don't know what Earth teaches its racers, but I saw something today I've never seen before." Jax replied, "We don't quit. That's our tradition." Cathera didn't respond. She just walked away, but deep inside something had changed. She was no longer sure that removing Jax was the answer. Because now, she wasn't even sure she could beat him. The night before the next race was strangely quiet on planet Varnock. The racers were given time to rest and prepare, but no one truly relaxed. Not before the Icefire run. This was the most dangerous track yet. The terrain was deadly, wide plains, covered in frozen glass, with rivers of blue fire running beneath the surface. Explosive heat bursts and sudden frost cracks made each second of the race unpredictable. Even the top racers feared it. Inside the Storm Arrow's maintenance tent, Jax Carter sat with his sleeves rolled up, working on the engine. His hands were covered in grease and wires, but his mind was sharp. "After what happened yesterday," he said, tightening a bolt, "I'm not trusting anyone else to touch this." His engineer, Lena, leaned against the tool rack. "We still don't know who sabotaged the stabilizer." "I do," Jax said calmly. Lena looked surprised. "You sure?" Jax nodded once. "Cathera, she's smart, calculated, and she sees me as a threat. But she's a champion. Why cheat?" Jax stopped working and looked out at the alien night sky. "Because I broke her pattern," he said. "She's used to control. I represent something she can't plan for, and that scares her." While Jax worked in silence, Cathera Vesk stood on the edge of the cliffs above the racers' camp. Her silver eyes stared at the night horizon, where the first lights of the Icefire Ridge were glowing faintly. The icy ground sparkled like diamonds under the twin moons, but the beauty was deceiving. Below those frozen fields, fire surged. The moment heat cracked through the ice, racers could be vaporized. Cathera held a small device in her hand, a hidden transmitter. She looked at it long and hard, then turned it off. She wasn't going to sabotage Jax again. What she had seen in the sandstorm run had left her shaken. Jax had driven through the worst storm Varnock had seen in years. by hand. No AI, no auto adjustments. Just human skill and determination. It had done more than impress her. It had made her doubt herself. Later that night, Cathera walked alone through the camp, her mind restless. She passed other racers sitting around small energy fires. Most nodded to her with respect. But when she neared the human tent, she paused. To her surprise, Jax was outside, leaning against his racer, looking up at the stars. He saw her and smiled, lightly. Couldn't sleep either? Cathera hesitated, then stepped closer. No, the ice fire run never lets anyone sleep easy. Jax chuckled. Good to know it's not just me. They stood in silence for a moment. Then she said, You shouldn't have survived the last race. I know, Jax replied, but I did. Cathera looked at him carefully. Why do you keep pushing? This circuit isn't made for humans. Jax shrugged. Maybe that's the point, to show that it can be. She folded her arms. You risk your life every time. For what? A trophy? He turned toward her. No, I race because I love it. And because someone has to be first, if not me, then who? Cathera didn't answer. His words felt honest. She respected that more than she wanted to admit. Before she left, Jax added, You're good, Cathera, maybe the best. But don't waste your time trying to stop me. Focus on beating me. That's more fun. A small smile formed on her lips as she turned away. We'll see, human. We'll see. The next morning, the sky over the icefire ridge was cloudless, but the ground was alive. Blue flames danced just beneath the icy surface. The track was marked only by faint energy poles, each one barely visible through the fog rising from the frozen fire below. 20 racers lined up once again, their vehicles humming with energy. The crowd was silent, nervous. Even spectators knew. This race had claimed more lives than any other. Jack sat in the Storm Arrow, focused. Lena's voice came through his earpiece. Everything's clean. No sabotage this time, you're clear. Thanks, Jax replied. Let's bring it home. At the far end of the starting line, Cathera sat inside her silver racer, her hands tight on the controls. No tricks this time, no hidden plans, just the race. Racers, the announcer's voice boomed from above. Prepare for the icefire run. Begin countdown. 3, 2, 1, go. The racers shot forward. The track immediately tested their skill. The ground was slippery, glass-like, and the slightest mistake could send a vehicle skidding into a fire crack. Jax leaned into the turns, using careful balance and control. The Storm Arrow glided with smooth movements. His human instincts allowed him to read the terrain in ways no sensor could. Suddenly, a fire burst erupted just ahead. One vehicle vanished in an explosion of light. Jack swerved just in time, passing the gap with inches to spare. More racers dropped out, one by one, the ridge claiming them like prey. Then, just past the halfway mark, Cathera's racer struck a crack in the ice. Her front stabilizer failed. She tried to correct, but her racer spun out, crashing hard into a frozen ridge. Her vehicle flipped and skidded, coming to a halt at the edge of a fire vent. One more shake and it would fall in. Inside, she was dazed, her head bleeding slightly, alarms flashing red. Emergency. Pilot critical. Systems failing. She tried to move, but pain held her still. All around, other racers passed her wreck without stopping. But one didn't. Jack saw her crash. Saw her vehicle about to fall into the fire pit. He could keep racing. He was in third and gaining fast. But he didn't even think. He turned the Storm Arrow around. Lena's voice screamed in his ear. Jax, what are you doing? You'll lose the race. I'm not leaving her to die, he replied. He reached her wreck in seconds, jumped out, and forced the door open. The heat was rising. Blue light flickered under the ice. Cathera looked up at him, shocked. You came back? Yeah, well, Jack said, lifting her over his shoulder. I'm stubborn that way. With every step, the ice cracked more. He reached the Storm Arrow, pushed her into the passenger seat and jumped in. Just as he hit the thrusters, the ice behind them broke open in a blast of blue flame. They shot forward, away from the fire. Safe. The race was over by the time they reached the finish line. Jax had come in 8th. He didn't care. The medical team rushed to Cathera, treating her injuries. She grabbed Jax's hand before they took her away. "You had no reason to save me," she whispered. Jax looked at her and said simply, "I didn't need a reason." The crowd, once silent, exploded in cheers, not for a victory but for something greater. For honor. That night, Cathera sat in the medical tent, her arm in a sling. Jax visited her, holding 2 cups of warm fruit brew. "For the pain," he said. She took one. "You lost your position in the race." "I gained something better," he replied. "A real rival." For the first time, she laughed softly. "You're strange, Jax Carter." He raised his cup. "And you're not so bad for a champion." The icefire run was over. The storm of fire and frost had passed, and the silence that followed felt strange. Jax Carter, the only human racer in the Deathworld circuit, had saved Cathera Vesk, the former champion, from being swallowed by the fire beneath the ice. He had lost his position in the race but gained something far greater: respect. Inside the recovery tent, Cathera rested. Her left arm was in a support brace, and her ribs were sore from the crash, but her mind was wide awake. She had never felt this confused before. For years, the Deathworld circuit had taught her that survival came first and competition came second, yet the human who had every reason to ignore her had risked everything to save her life. She heard a soft knock. "Come in," she said. The tent flap opened, and Jax stepped inside, carrying a small package of fruit capsules and a warm flask. "Didn't want to come empty-handed," he said with a small smile. Cathera looked at him for a moment before sitting up slowly. "You don't give up, do you?" "Nope," Jax said, handing her the flask. "I'm human. We're pretty stubborn." She took a sip. The warmth spread through her chest. For a few seconds there was only silence between them. Then she said something unexpected. "I sabotaged your stabilizer." Jax didn't move. He just looked at her, calm and quiet. "I figured," he said. "You knew?" Jax nodded. "I couldn't prove it, but I knew it was you. You weren't the only one watching me closely. I watched you too." Cathera lowered her eyes. "Why didn't you report me?" "Because I don't win by ruining others," Jax replied. "That's not racing, that's fear." Her fingers tightened around the flask. She had never felt so exposed. "So, guilty. You should hate me." "I don't," Jax said simply. "I think you were scared, not of me, but of what I represented." Cathera looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You've ruled this track for years, but I'm something new. I broke the pattern. If a human can survive here, what else can change?" She fell silent again. Deep inside, his words rang true. She had trained to be perfect, to never make mistakes. But Jax had raced with heart, instinct, and something even stronger: hope. Outside the tent, the circuit board was already meeting. The icefire run had stirred the public across the galaxy. The video of Jax's rescue had gone viral. People didn't just see a human racer anymore. They saw a hero. A few members of the board wanted to disqualify him. "He left the track," they argued. "That breaks the rules." But others defended him fiercely. He saved a champion. He risked his life, not for glory, but for honor. That is what the circuit truly stands for. In the end, the final vote was cast. Jax Carter would stay in the race. He was given full clearance for the final event. The Maw. Later that evening, the racers gathered for the pre-final briefing. Everyone was tense. The Maw was the last race, held at the edge of a spinning black hole surrounded by floating debris and shifting gravitational fields. It was the most feared course of them all. Only 3 racers had ever finished it without crashing. Jax entered the hall to find every alien watching him, not with hate, but with quiet respect. Some nodded at him. Others moved aside to give him space. He didn't smile. He just took a seat at the edge. Cathera entered a few minutes. Later, her arm still in a brace, she walked straight to Jax. "Still think you can beat me, human?" she asked, standing tall. Jax raised an eyebrow. "Absolutely." The two of them smiled. Not as enemies. Not even as rivals anymore. As equals. That night, Jax and Lena worked in silence. The Storm Arrow had suffered through 3 brutal races, and now it needed to be at its strongest. "Your steering module's a little loose," Lena said, tightening a bolt. "And your fuel converter is running hot. We need to rewire the coolant valves." Jax nodded. "Do it, we can't risk anything." Lena glanced at him. "You really think you can win the Maw?" Jax thought for a moment. "Winning isn't just about crossing the line first anymore. If I finish that course, that's already a win for Earth." She smiled. "Let's make sure the galaxy never forgets your name." Meanwhile, in her own camp, Cathera dismissed her engineer and stood, alone with her racer. She gently touched the metal surface, remembering the races she had won, and the mistakes she had made. This race wasn't just about defending her title now, it was about proving that she could change. She opened a small compartment in her racer's core and removed a tiny black chip, the last tool of Sabotage. She looked at it for a long moment before crushing it beneath her boot. No more cheating, no more fear, only racing. Before dawn, the final race was announced. "Welcome to the Maw." The announcer's voice echoed across space, where gravity bends and only the bold survive. The racers were flown by shuttle to the orbit ring surrounding the black hole. From their launch pads, they could see the giant swirling void in the distance. Its pull was strong, and even time itself moved slower near its edges. The course was marked with glowing beacons, floating platforms, and spinning asteroid rings. Racers had to loop around the gravity zones 3 times and finish without falling into the vortex. Jack stood beside the Storm Arrow, his helmet under his arm. Cathera walked up to him one last time before the race. "No tricks," she said. "No, shortcuts," he replied. "Just racing." Jax nodded. "Let's give them a show." The signal blared. 3, 2, 1. Launch. The racers shot forward into space, engines roaring. Gravity bent around them, pulling, twisting, warping. Every second was a battle against unseen forces. Jax gripped the controls tight. The Storm Arrow danced between debris fields and magnetic zones. He dodged a spinning asteroid and boosted through a collapsing wormhole gap. Behind him, Cathera was closing in fast. They passed the first loop neck and neck. The second loop tested them even more. One racer spun out and was lost to the black hole's pull. Another exploded after hitting a debris cluster. Only Jax, Cathera, and one more alien racer remained. As they entered the final loop, Jax pulled ahead with a risky slingshot maneuver, using gravity to throw his racer around a collapsed star core. Cathera followed close behind, mimicking his move with her own twist. It came down to the last few seconds. The finish line appeared in sight. All 3 racers pushed their engines to the max. In the final burst of speed, Jax crossed first. Cathera came second, only a blink behind him. The crowd across the galaxy erupted. Earth's first champion had won. The moment Jax Carter crossed the finish line, time seemed to stop. His heart was still pounding from the rush of flying past a collapsing asteroid, using the gravity pull to slingshot his vehicle through the final curve. The finish line flashed, passed in a blink, and then the Storm Arrow slowed down, its engine finally resting after the hardest race of its life. Behind him, Cathera Vesk crossed second, just a heartbeat later. The third racer trailed them by several seconds. But the real surprise wasn't just who won, it was how. Across the galaxy, billions of screens displayed the final footage. Drones had captured every angle, every move. Audiences watched, stunned, as Jax used nothing but instinct and fast thinking to escape dangerous traps in the Maw. They saw how close he came to disaster, again and again. And then they saw something more. They saw Cathera, former champion, chasing him with determination, not 8. They saw two rivals pushing each other to their limits with respect, not revenge. This was no longer a battle of pride. It had become a moment of unity. The crowd at the viewing station on planet Varnock erupted into applause. People of all species, creatures with fur, scales, feathers, and more, stood together and cheered. He did it. The human won. By the stars, what a finish. Some had doubted him. Others had mocked Earth. But now, no one could deny what they had seen. Jax Carter had not only survived the Deathworld circuit, he had conquered it. As the racers returned to the platform, reporters swarmed them. Drones hovered nearby, broadcasting the live aftermath. But Jax ignored the cameras. His first move was to step out of the storm arrow and walk straight to Cathera. She stood tall, still catching her breath, her silver skin shining under the light of the orbiting station. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she offered her hand. "I thought I was ready for anything," she said. "But I wasn't ready for you." Jax took her hand and shook it firmly. Neither was I. Their handshake became the most shared image across the galaxy that day. Later that evening, Jax stood alone in a quiet corner of the viewing deck, looking out at the swirling black hole in the distance. The crowd noise was far behind him now. He was tired. His body ached, but he smiled to himself. He had done what many thought was impossible. He had proven that humans belonged here, not just as guests, but as true racers among the stars. Lena approached with a datapad. "You're all over the news feeds," she said. "Interviews, offers, even a statue proposal. You're officially a galactic icon now." Jax laughed softly. "A statue? That's too much." Lena grinned. "You earned it." He turned serious. "What about Earth? How are they reacting?" She scrolled through updates. The whole planet stayed up to watch. Schools played the race live in class. News channels called it the most important race in human history. Jax looked out at the stars again. "That's what I wanted," he said. "Not just to win, but to open the door." The next day, a special ceremony was held in the central arena of Varnock. The champions of the Deathworld circuit stood on a stage surrounded by thousands of spectators. Flags of many species waved in the air. The circuit director, a tall being with glowing blue eyes, stepped forward with a silver crown-shaped medal. "We have seen bravery before," he announced. "We have seen speed, and skill, and strength. But this cycle we saw something more." He turned toward Jax. "A human stepped into our most dangerous tradition. He was doubted, mocked, sabotaged. And yet, he stood tall. He raced with honor. He rescued a rival. And he raced not only to win, but to show who he was." The crowd cheered as the director placed the medal around Jax's neck. "For the first time in history," the director said, "Earth has given us a champion." Jax raised the medal, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. After the ceremony, Cathera joined Jax backstage. She had removed her racing gear and wore a simple black and silver robe. There was a calmness in her eyes now. "You changed everything, you know," she said. "Did I?" Jax asked. "Yes," she replied. "Next year there will be humans training for this circuit. Other species too. You showed that skill comes from will, not just biology." Jax nodded. "That's the goal. I didn't want to be the only one forever, just the first," she smiled. "I'm glad it was you." They stood together in silence for a moment. "Would you ever race again?" she asked. Jax laughed. "Are you challenging me again already?" Cathera's eyes sparkled. "No sabotage. This time, just you, me, and the track." He grinned. "Then count me in." Weeks later, Jax returned to Earth. He stepped off the ship to find crowds waiting at the spaceport. Children wore racing helmets holding signs with his name. Journalists called out for questions. Scientists requested interviews. His name was known everywhere. But what mattered most to him was the little boy in the front row, standing with a homemade storm arrow toy in his hand. "Jax Carter," the boy shouted. "I'm going to be a racer just like you." Jax knelt down. and signed the toy. "You'll be better," he said with a smile. Back in his home garage, the real Storm Arrow rested under a protective cover. It was scratched, scorched, and dented from the brutal races. But Jax didn't fix it. He wanted it to stay that way, as a reminder of the path he had taken and maybe, just maybe, to be ready for the next call. Because the galaxy was big, and there were more tracks out there, more races, more challenges, and Jax Carter, Earth's first Deathworld champion, wasn't finished yet.